Hey guys, hope you've had a wonderful Christmas. Welcome to part 2 of the best of 2024 as chosen by you. Hey everyone, just a quickie before we get into the conversation. The podcast is always going to be free, so I'm never going to ask you to pay for anything. But if you could do me the kindness of subscribing and maybe leaving a review, that would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you and enjoy the episode.
Learning to become secure, it just takes a lot more work. It takes a lot more effort because you're changing these habits. It's easy to just pick up your phone and distract yourself and make the feeling go away or suppress the feeling in that moment. But to ask yourself those questions and sit with your feelings and try to meet your needs in healthier ways, I mean, that exerts a lot more energy.
Yeah, I suppose working towards secure attachment, I suppose you could actually, it's like 1,000 new habits to learn, isn't it? Yes. Or 1,000 different jujitsu moves or whatever. Like, what am I going to do in this scenario? Yeah. I get this thing, so okay, right, I need to learn that one. Okay, and that's the little. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I've never really thought of it like that. I got a bit of an insight there. You're just learning all the different moves and
yes,
yeah, and being aware of like what are the possible things that I could be confronted with, and then learning how to respond correctly. And like
100%.
The phone is a real good example. Obviously, it's somewhat abstract because it's about a phone, but it's about realizing, rather than avoiding your feeling that you feel uncomfortable, recognizing it in the moment, sitting with that feeling, allowing it to dissipate or allowing it to be there, and probably it was dissipate after some time. Would we say that is a secure act? Interesting.
Yeah. So it could also be too, because remember that your feelings are always going to guide you to your temporary needs. So it could be that your feeling is telling you, hey, there's a physiological need for water, food, shelter, right? Go outside and walk, breathe. Or your feeling is telling you, hey, Jason, you spent a lot of time by yourself, right? Like, go talk to a friend, go connect with somebody. So there's healthy ways to meet these needs where we actually do connect with people and we have a meaningful conversation, or we hug somebody, or whatever it is, hug our dog, and we feel the need, feel a connection and the attention there. Or there's unhealthy ways of meeting our needs where maybe we feel the discomfort and we immediately go to our phone, or we feel the discomfort and we, focus on work and focus on hobbies. Again, those things, there's a fine line because that can sometimes be unhealthy if we're doing it excessively, right? So other distractions can be work. Other distractions can be hobbies. So where are you meeting these needs and not balancing it out with real connection, with real closeness and intimacy and vulnerability?
Yeah, it's I had this conversation. I had a conversation recently with one of my guests, and we disagreed on this. And she's on OnlyFans. This is what we're talking about. And we were having like a philosophical discussion around like pros and cons, and how arguments for OnlyFans being that it's maybe more safe than traditional like sex work. And then we were sort of like unpacking, well, what are the downsides, what are the costs, is it a service, what are the effects on let's say men and having access to this sort of thing. And then she brought up like I don't know if she brought it up, sorry, or whether it was me, and we were talking about how, like, what is the trigger? Is the trigger like pain? And then you're like, oh, I'm feeling pain, so then okay, I'm going to watch porn or something like that. And we're having this discussion around, well, I would argue that's a negative behavioral pattern. Like, you shouldn't be, yeah, it could be problematic to be reaching for that sort of thing when in a negative state of mind, just like it is with alcohol or any other addictive behavior.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just weird. I mean, obviously it's slightly abstract from what we're talking about, just but I feel like it links into what we were talking about in honoring the emotion,
Right.
rather than
Right. Yeah.
like constantly going for the distraction. But yeah, it's a minefield. But I think everyone's got to do the work, right?
Yeah, and here's the thing too. It's like I believe in like everything in healthy balance as well, right? It's like sometimes, I will have a need for, I just want to relax and I'll grab a glass of wine and relax, or maybe I'll have a drink and relax. But if I'm always right, if I'm forming a habit where every time I'm feeling this way, I have to grab that drink or I have to look at porn or whatever it is that your behavior is, that's when it becomes excessive. That's when you're not really attuning to your emotional needs. But if, you do it once in a while and it's not really hurting you or anybody, that's fine too. It's not to like totally restrict yourself, but there is always a fine line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think watching those patterns, and if it's becoming a habit, then it's something to consider. Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. What is love addiction?
I guess that kind of falls with kind of what we've been talking about, right? Man, I feel like I'm love addicted. I feel like that's been my entire life, to be totally honest. Yeah. And I think that kind of falls with, you see this more with the anxious attachment. If you have more of the anxious attachment style, you fall more in that spectrum. And again, it's when you have made a habit to meet your emotional needs, your psychological needs through the other, right? So there's this level of codependency. There's this level of you will make me happy. Love will make me happy. There's this like idealization and pedestaling love and pedestaling a partner. So I think that when we have created this dependency where someone else, where love, where a relationship is going to give us value, it's going to give us meaning, it's going to make us happy, that's where we can kind of become addicted, right? To eating that need in that way.
Yeah, because it's literally kind of like keeping you going. Your all of your energy is coming from the other person. And and I mean, it's crazy as well when you think about like how we've grown up as well, and look at like pop culture and pop music especially, and you listen to like all these songs now and you're like, serious attachment issues going on.
Yes.
Right? Like I need you, like that must be like, I need you is probably must be like one of the most common things ever in songwriting. And there's so much of it, isn't it? And like we look at, like certainly for me as well, like rock stars and the Rolling Stones and all these bands and the Beatles, and they were like my heroes, and you look up to them as like these gods. And then, but then the messaging, like that we're picking up on, like subconsciously, in a lot of these stuff are like extremely toxic in some, in some examples, and then just like hugely needy and just like
oh my God.
But I guess like
yeah,
I guess maybe that's changing. I'm not that familiar with like modern day like music, but I don't know whether they're all like talking about doing ice baths and yoga. Talking
Yeah.
about the
Well,
setting the
nowadays,
boundaries. Sexy.
yeah. 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 I don't know. I feel like music a lot of days now is like very derogatory in a sense towards I just get the sense towards like women in general now. It's like you're just kind of treated as a commodity in a
Really?
way. It's not very, yeah, I don't know. But yeah, growing up, just watching Disney
Mm-hmm.
movies, which added to the love addiction, right? Where it's like a prince is going to save me, right? A man is going to save me. I can't, I'm going to wait for him. And it's like you romanticize relationships, you idealize these relationships. And then when I actually got into a secure relationship, I realized, no, like it is not about that. I actually have to be an independent person in this
Mm.
relationship. My prince or my whatever, my prince is not a perfect person. He's gonna upset me. He's gonna let me down. And this sucks,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so man, it's like once you realize the reality of a relationship, you're just like love is just it's a brutal awakening, Jason.
Mm.
It's a brutal awakening when it's not what you expected. It's not this fairy tale, you know?
Interesting. Yeah. That's a much more realistic view of the world. And I guess all things like seem to boil down to expectations as well. Like what are your expectations in life, what are your expectations in love. And I think having that sort of
Yeah.
from the outset, like, I want to get married because it's going to be like all like magical and stuff. But like, no, 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 no. If you want to get married, it's going to be tough.
No.
It's going to be loads of
Yes.
compromise. You're going to have to be incredibly intentional. You're going to have to, have each other's backs, all this sort of stuff. And I suppose, this is nothing new. Like we hear this a lot, but it really is true. And I think so many people
Yeah.
fall into, like, say, this love addiction, this like, because it's so it's such a rush, isn't it? Like, if you are on the insecure attachment style as well,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's well, they say love is a drug, right?
Yeah, I actually made
Did
a
you?
poem back when I was 16 years old. It was love. Yeah, I was like, "You are my drug." I think it was titled "You are the drug I love to take." The drug I love to take.
Oh, bless you.
Yeah, so I feel ya.
What about loneliness? Like how do the different attachment styles like respond to loneliness?
Mm, yeah. I feel like loneliness is such an epidemic, even more now these days. Um, yeah, I feel like there's been a huge shift in that. But often, again, avoidant attachments, right? If you're fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant, they're often pretty comfortable with the
Mm,
loneliness, right? So they like to be on their own. They like their space. They like their autonomy. So they're often pretty comfortable in that place. Whereas people that fall more on the anxious spectrum, or if you're fearful, avoidant, leaning more anxious, loneliness can feel very difficult. It's very challenging because, again, you have more of a need for connection and closeness and proximity. So it can be a lot more challenging for those of us that have more of the anxious attachment.
mm.
Yeah.
The next one is like kind of related, and it's that most of the time, difficult conversations aren't even difficult. So there may be a situation where just sending a WhatsApp out is not sufficient, and you actually like need to pick up the phone or pop round for a conversation with this person. And basically, how many times do we like build it up in our head where it's like it's going to be this big deal? More often than not, it's like so straightforward and actually ends up being like a beautiful opportunity to connect with this person. I don't ever remember having to have one of those difficult conversations and it not ending in like a plus with that person. Like it always seems to, like, I think it shows a lot of respect that you want to sit down with that person or talk to them and be open. So yeah, most of the time it's not difficult. So get the conversation. This next one came from my conversation with Persia Lawson, and we were talking about dating and how I was showing up and how I was not enjoying it. And basically what she said to me is like what my end goal was, what I pictured, and I had this thing of like, I'm in my garden at the barbecue and there's kids running around and stuff like that. That's kind of like my dream goal. And she was like, how would that guy show up like in his dating life? And it was just like a real, and you can use it for like so many different things. Like maybe if it's like a place you want to get to in the future in your career or whatever, like, and like how would that person be feeling now? Like how can you show up like that? But specifically, I think it works best in dating. I've always done the best on dating apps when I've gone into it already feeling like the person like that I want to be. And I guess it goes back to this authenticity thing, but also it's like there's like a kind of sort of addictive element that goes in here. So like I'm feeling shit, so I need to do X thing. And I've done that before. Like I'm feeling shit and down, so I'm going to sign up for Tinder and I'm going to start talking to lasses. Don't get me wrong, like sometimes that goes okay, but more often than not, you're not on your best form. You've not got like that much to say. But if you like are already feeling confident and already feeling like you've got something to offer the world and you go onto a dating app, then you're just going to like be so much better. I know for me, like I'm just so much more confident. Everything just seems easy. And yeah, so that's something I'm trying to deploy at the moment, and seems to be working. The next one is 99% of the time, it's them. Any situation, difficult conversation that you're having with someone, an interaction, could be dating. Like most of this is kind of like coming from dating, but it's got like an attachment lens on it. But most of the time, it's them. Like rather than going, this person's been like this with me or whatever. It's this. It's a judgment. It's a value judgment on me. I'm not good enough. Blah 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 blah. Like most of the time, unless you're a complete dick, like it's them. Like they got their shit going on. I'll give you an example. I was talking to this girl, and I knew weirdly because I'd actually found out through an attachment quiz because we both did one while we were talking, and she's like disorganized, fearful, avoidant type, which is just kind of like whoa. And she would just go like days without responding and stuff. And like my default approach would be to kind of like, oh, it's because of me, like I'm not good enough, like this is what happens when I start talking to people, I get hurt, da 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 da. But it's like that's literally her shit. Like it's got nothing to do with me. Like, all right, maybe like she didn't fancy me that much, but who cares? Like that's totally on them, because if that person was secure and didn't fancy me, they'd just be like, hey, this isn't working. So like it doesn't matter, does it? And yeah, just remember, like whether it's friends or like maybe your mate's been a dickhead or whatever, and like your like tendency might be to like worry about your own thing. Obviously, like check yourself, but just remember that most of the time it's the other person if you've got your shit together. This next one is harnessing negative and positive visualization. So what you can do is it's good for motivation, and you may have a meditation practice, but at the end of my meditation practice I have like a few things that I run through, and I use this custom timer that I mentioned before. So what I'll do is I'll have like a few things that I'll run through, that it just like reads out loud for me. So it might be, I can use it in productivity as well. It's like, what's the most important task today? All right, what are 2 less important tasks? Stuff like that. But one of the ones that I use is this negative and positive visualization. So if you've got something that you need to do, a big project that you're getting on with, like maybe you need to reflect on like, how will I feel if I don't do that thing, and like feel that pain, and then that will get you into like the mind for like, fucking hell, I'm going to do it, and vice versa. But you might need it the other way. How will I feel once I've completed the activity? And put yourself in that frame of mind. So you'll need to work out for yourself which one it needs to be. I tend to just like switch them up. Like if one's not working, I'll go negative. If the negative's not working, I'll go positive. And that's something that's a really useful tool. And you can literally just do it for like 1 minute per thing. So I have a couple that I do. One of them is for the podcast, just to keep me motivated to keep on doing this, talking to a camera in a room. The next one is from he's a poet called David White, and I heard him on a podcast, and he basically said, how can you be the ancestor of your future happiness? How can you be the ancestor of your future happiness? And basically it's just like, we all want to look back and be proud of that version of ourselves. Like, what are the things, like, we can all look back on times in our lives. Maybe you did a marathon. Maybe you climbed up a mountain for the first time. Maybe you lost a lot of weight. Maybe you put a lot of weight on, whatever it may be. Maybe you wrote a book. Maybe you handed in your dissertation, all these kind of things that we're proud of. Like, how can you be doing that now? So what would that version of you be doing now? Like, would he be watching telly on Netflix and completely wasting the weekend? Or would he or she be doing productive things, getting to the gym, working on an important project, recording a podcast, whatever it may be? So yeah, how can you be the ancestor of your future happiness? Really good one. Think about how you will look back. Will you be proud of what you were doing? Next one is a little bit of a kind of productivity one, kind of links into some of the other ones that we were talking about before. But it's just, can I do 10 minutes? Do I have 10 minutes to do a certain thing? It could be tidying the house. It could be a project that you need to do, and you just can't get started on it for some reason. You've maybe got writer's block or any of that sort of thing. And it's just, can I do 10 minutes? Or can I do 5 minutes? Can I do 1 minute? Whatever it is. I mean, if you can do an hour, great. But more often than not, if you've got an issue with getting motivated, the idea of doing an hour on a certain task is too much. So think about what would work for you. 10 minutes tends to be about right for me. And I'll go, right, can I do 10 minutes tidying the kitchen? Yeah, I can do that. So go into my phone, 10-minute timer, and then I'll like rush to be like, right, see how much I can get done. And then I'm going to sit on my ass and I'm going to watch telly afterwards. And then, surprise, surprise, the timer goes off 10 minutes in, and I've already got moving, and I've already got that momentum. And then I end up cleaning the whole fucking house and like having a good rest of the day. So that's a really good one. And you can do it for like the gym. Like, if you don't want to go to the gym, what if I just went for 10 minutes, get my stuff on, and I go lift weights for 10 minutes, or I'll go for a run for 10 minutes. And by the time you get there, then you'll probably just stay anyways. But allow yourself, if you really want, to just do the 10 minutes, and that's fine as well. And this last one is around advice and being a good listener and a good friend. So if someone comes to you with a problem, they say, I just really need to talk to you about something. I've got this issue. It might be a financial issue, or it might be an issue with a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it may be. We hear a lot like, girls just want to be listened to, boys want solutions, or you sometimes hear it's just no one wants a solution. Hear that one a lot, but I'm not sure that's true. And just ask them what they want. Like, listen to them and say, would you like me to come up with would you like a solution, or do you just want me to listen? Like, just so I know. Like, and someone did this to me once, a friend of mine, and she was like, and she just went, do you want me to listen, or do you want a solution? And I was like, oh. And I was like, both. Both. And yeah, and it was awesome, because like, how many times as well has someone started giving you a solution, but like, fuck off, I don't want the solution. Like, I literally just wanted to whine at you. But maybe by asking that, it actually like activates a different part of the brain, and we go, yeah, I do want a solution. Who knows? But yeah, so that is a good one. So if I come to you with a problem, make sure you ask me which version I would.
It's a common question of like, is a lot of sex bad? Is a lot of sex good? There's so many different voices on that, is what I can tell. Like, there's because I also deal a lot with like spirituality, and there's a lot of teachings around how you have an exchange of energy and how that can be draining if you engage too much sexually with other people. Then there are other voices from the more like politically progressive side that will focus on how it is important to have that freedom of like sexually engaging with other people as much as you like. And I think there's no, I don't believe in like black and white ideas. I think this is it's super individual. Some people, they experience some true liberation by being promiscuous. Absolutely. And I've had that with clients, and I've noticed how that has been an extremely healthy process for people to, kind of get out of those roles and try shit out. Like, that's also something, it's like a lot of people just haven't experienced it. And if you haven't experienced things, sometimes it's very difficult to tell if that fits into your design of how you want to live. And then there are other people, also in my work, that are or have been very promiscuous and actually have experienced like some real problems with that, or have used that as a method to kind of like measure their self-worth. And that's something that is not very long lasting. And so it can be very problematic. And just one thing that I see from the media that people voluntarily or involuntarily consume is that there's a clear message, or like contradicting messages. Actually, there are messages on like how being promiscuous is freedom, and then there are other messages on how like basically we're not entirely out of these stereotypical roles that we had 50 years ago. So I think that's just very, very difficult to navigate. And in our generation, we've had a bit of it. I think you're also like me, like part of the later MTV generation. So we've already had a lot of like visually stimulating, sexualized content, but not as much as the younger generations have now. And I think that's it just can be very confusing. And they're undergoing a similar process that I think is natural in the Western society, is that I come out of puberty, out of this process of like leaving my my core family and having to like get away from all of these values first so that I can figure out who I am and what I want to do with life. And I think that's a natural process. But then you usually kind of like partially spiral back onto like, this is your safe ground, this is what you have learned and you have internalized it anyways. And then you come into these 20s, being an adult sexual being and having pleasurable experiences with that. But also, you know, there's a threat of like using this as a tool to define my self-worth. And in both directions, this can be very unhealthy if like my self-worth is tied to being very sexually active, and that's not a great thing. And if my self-worth is tied to being not sexually active at all, like in religious groups, and that's not very healthy as well. Like figuring out what you like and what you want is a process, and the media around us is not making it easier. That's for sure. I don't think that's a great answer, but that's
No.
the complicated reality.
No, it's perfect. Like, yeah, there's a reason. Like, my podcast is called Awaken Out of Context, and sometimes I need to remind myself of why it's actually called that.
Yeah.
But it's like it's basically a play on words, like taken out of context, because everything gets taken out of context, and in life there are no straight lines. There is no cookie cutter answer. As much as I like to like find one and then put it on and clip it up and put it on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like paradoxically, the kind of those things are useful and useful tools, but they won't like get to the core of like the issue or the nuance that comes with all this stuff.
Yeah.
So like, so what you're saying is, yeah, it's just a beautiful exploration of the complexities of all of these things that interplay. And as you're speaking, like it just got me thinking. Like, there's just so many things to consider. I think, like, how do you feel about? You mentioned earlier in this conversation about like nudity and like families, and like how can parents instill like a more like a healthy approach to like sexuality without like overstepping the marks? And that's full of like a million different questions itself, isn't it?
I last year I did a workshop for parents actually on that.
Wow.
And so like anything with parenting, in regards to parenting, comes back to the best thing that you can do for your child is to be authentic and approachable, which means that you must work without concepts. Like I can tell you like this and that is the healthiest way to experience sexuality, eroticism for children, adolescents. But then if it's just a concept to you, that you're kind of like putting over this whole relationship that you have to your child, and it's not going to do that thing. It's going to do an entirely different thing. So that's the real tricky part about being a parent is, and I have to think about Ramdas, funnily enough, because I'm actually not a great fan of Ramdas, but
Okay.
he has this teaching of like where he says, the only thing I can do for you is work on myself, and the only thing that you can do for me is work on yourself. And this goes for all sorts of adult relationships, but it actually also goes for the relationships with your children. Is that the very best thing that you can do for your children is work on yourself, actually. It's like work on your issues. Everything that you have not looked at, that you haven't put out on the table, is something that you will unconsciously transfer into the lives of your children.
Yes.
So if you want to teach them a somewhat healthy relationship with their sexuality, which we have already said is not entirely possible in the society that we have, but as much as you can, then it's really just working on your own relationship to your sexuality. So if you're not comfortable being naked, then that's okay. You don't have to run around the house uncomfortably naked so that your children will be more comfortable with it, because they won't.
Yeah, because they'll pick up on the signal that you're uncomfortable anyways.
Yeah, because like the underlying feelings and intentions, they always play a role in the outcome.
It says, do you have a morning routine? Yes. So I wake up every day at 6:50. I go downstairs. I make up 3 of these glass Kilner jars, not affiliated. I line up 3 of them and like a protein shaker, steel one, so it's not plastic, so you're getting the BPAs and stuff like that. And put all the water in them. I put some electrolytes, just basic bulk, unflavored electrolytes in each of them and in the metal shaker. And then I put some, it's kind of expensive and I don't know if it's working, but Huel Daily Greens goes in. Literally, I don't know where it's working, it's really expensive. And I have a cheaper greens one, which is just like minging mud water, which definitely seems like it's doing something because it tastes minging. And I put some of that in with that mixer. I'm doing 12 grams of creatine at the moment a day, which is quite a lot, but apparently it's good for brain health, so I'm giving that a go. So I put 6 grams in there, and then I have Clear Whey, my protein Clear Whey, and like the orange or the apple one is good. I've got peach at the moment because it was on offer. And then I put about 30 to 35 grams of protein in there. So apparently, like that's how much you need to like kickstart the protein synthesis or whatever in the morning. Yeah, kickstart like your metabolism. Stick that in there, shake it up. And then what I'm trying to do as much as I can, I try and do some sort of workout, even if it's small, before every meal, just to kind of like uptake of glucose. And the idea being like, if you're like opening up the like the cells, that's more likely for the protein to like shuttle into the muscles. So what I'm doing at the moment is it's dead basic, but I have my hands in the air because it's a bit like a wall ball for high rocks. So it's just kind of helping with that. Hands in the air, holding it like that. So I've got to hold them. And then I do just air squats without weight, as many as I can until they're screaming. I don't do more than one set. I just do one. And I'm doing like 45 of them at the moment. And then that's about it. Got a little bit of a pant on. And then I neck the protein, the electrolytes, all that good stuff. Then stick my shoes on, my barefoot shoes, and have a walk around the block, which is about 10 minutes. And I try and get sunlight in my eyes, which is a little clears out the adenosine, which is this thing that makes you tired, gets rid of that. And I will try and get like quite a lot of the sun. So if the sun is coming up over the hill, this is also what I do is I do some shoulder mobility while I'm walking. I always feel dead awkward. So as I'm walking along the road, I'll do 10 like big circles with my arms forward and then 10 back. And I like really try and engage, push right back, get the scapula and all that in. So people like see me and I'm just like waving my arms about looking like I'm shitting my pants. But yeah, that's also like a little bit of a like thingy challenge where like make yourself feel uncomfortable because I could walk past people and they're just like, what the fuck is he doing? But I do it regardless. And try and like get as much sun in my eyes as possible. So if it is actually like the sun's coming up, I'll kind of just look at it. And my like my goal is to try and sneeze twice. So like look at it, and I'll be like, like honestly, and like usually the sun is like slightly off center. So I'm walking down the road after I've done my arm circles, and I'm like looking out. If anyone's walking towards me, I'm like looking and like squinting at the sun. Fucking madman. Don't look directly at the sun, folks. Guys, who says folks? See, I'm being all American. Be authentic, Jason. And so yeah, and then if it's overcast or whatever, I will just like look at where the sun normally is, or I'll put my head back and like I'm walking, and I'll just try and get as much in my eyes. Like you can really feel it like getting into your like receptors, and if anyone doesn't know, it's because solar angle controls your circadian rhythm. It's kind of like a marker for the start of the day to allow your body to know that it's the start of the day, and roughly in 16 hours time you're going to be going to bed. So doing that in the morning will help you sleep. You can hear all about that on Andrew Huberman's podcast. And if it's raining, I'll go out in the rain. Don't know what I'm going to be doing in winter. In the winter, I'll probably go in the bin, in my ice bath bin. I'm not doing that at the moment. Get back home, and then I get in, and then put the kettle on. I grind my own coffee beans. I don't grow the beans, buy the beans in. I sometimes get them from Exhale, but they're expensive. So it'll be a mix. Sometimes it's cheap shit or whatever, but I'll always grind my own. Then I'll put in some L-theanine, which kind of like it's L-theanine is the extract that's found in tea and in green tea, which kind of gives you like that kind of like relaxed feeling. So stick that in with the coffee. It allows you to like have a bit more, feels a bit floaty. And what else goes in there? And then if I can afford it, I have collagen, hydrolyzed beef collagen from Hunter Gather. It's called bovine, which is basically like unflavored. But it's actually like all right. Like you wouldn't think it would taste all right. It's kind of like tastes like nothing / creamy. So that goes in. Stick that in the big old cafetiere. It's like this big. If anyone's listening, it's like I don't know, my head and a bit. And then cold shower, always cold. I use Bear Bar soap. Christian, shout out to Christian. And yeah, and then after that, we're doing get dressed. Sit down with my coffee, and then I will listen to something before I meditate. So it might be like usually something like ideally something kind of like philosophically, something a bit kind of like not challenging, but just kind of a little bit like open the mind up a little bit. The best source for that is the Waking Up app, which is Sam Harris's meditation app. And he has like philosophers in there doing talks and stuff. So I'll listen to like maybe like a 10-minute clip, something a little bit different. And then I'll do a meditation and I'll just shuffle different types. So yeah, I'm doing a new one course on them at the moment. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, I used to use Headspace. Headspace like is really good, but it's like kind of weird. I feel like it's going to like really woke. I went to use it the other day, and it was first started by this guy called Andy. Andy, can't remember his name. Well, let's find out. Andy Headspace. Space. Andy Puddicombe. Yeah, there's an English guy who set it up, and he used to be like the main guy, and he'd be like, I can't do an impression of it. I just had this really soft. When we're training the mind, it was like a nice voice. Some people didn't like it. I liked it. And then they started changing. They brought in different voices, sort of. So they brought in a woman, and then they brought in like a woman of color, and then there was like a guy of color, man of color. Why does that sound weird? And by the way, I'm not like, that's awesome. I wasn't saying that was woke. And then I noticed some stuff that they were saying, and then I went to use it the other day, and instead of having a choice, so you could change who was reading it to you. And by the way, I would mix it up. I sometimes have the black woman. I sometimes have Andy. Like, I'll mix it up. No judgment, whatever choice you have. And then I feel like this is fucking weird territory now. And they've changed it to this like generic name, which is like it's not a person, and I think it must be AI generated, and it's like a merged being. So if you listen to it, her, him, I think it's a like he, she, they, them, an AI they, them that's also black and also white. Fuck knows. Literally, when you're listening, you're kind of like, you can't actually tell. Like, bizarre. So side note on that. So I don't know what's going on with Headspace. So I'm on Waking Up app. I do a meditation, usually about 10 to 15 minutes. And then after that, it's long, this, isn't it? It's 2 hours long, my morning routine. And I don't even really work out. It's not like, yeah. And then I will, I have this seconds timer, which is on my Android. And I have custom like things set up so that it shouts something out like every 30 seconds. I'll give you an example. Morning to do reflection full. So it's a 10-minute thing. And then, so like there's a 30 seconds thing where it says, let's see if it really, oh, here we go.
Think about how you will feel when you publish 50 podcast episodes.
So I think about how I'll feel when I've published 50 podcast episodes. And sometimes that used to be like, think about how you'll feel when you stop publishing podcast episodes. So allow me to, so just, it like activates that little bit of motivation. So it's like a positive one. And then I have like other ones in there and just like prompts, like my daily prompts. So it's just an easy way of doing like my daily tasks. So I've like, we'll look ahead 3 days for 25 seconds. So I'll just go in my calendar and I'll just like, look, what have I got on? Check and start emails. So I'll go into my Gmail. I'll like look through anything that might need my attention. I'll star it. Then I've unsubscribed to 5 emails. That's for 30 seconds. I'll go through, I'll unsubscribe, quickly respond to the starred emails. So go into the starred tasks and then I look on there. And then if there's any that I can quickly respond to, I will do it. And then if not, I'll add any starred emails into my tasks, to my Google tasks, because it integrates with Gmail. And then I've set up an integration, a 2-way one using Zapier, that adds it into my TickTick, which is a productivity app that I use. But you could just use it straight out of Google Tasks. And then more of that sort of stuff. And then it's just like, what's the most important thing to do today? Like delete some tasks, get rid of old ones, is there anything? And then, yeah. So, and then send one podcast invite. That's like one of my daily things. So I'll do that. And then I'll probably have a poo. And then it's time to go to work. And yeah, so that's my morning routine. Fucking hell, that's like, I don't know how long that was.
The women, on the other hand, the difference between what the machine said they were aroused by and what their button was significantly statistically non-aligned.
Stated and revealed preferences.
Their body would say I'm aroused, but their mind didn't. Or their mind might say I'm aroused, but their body wasn't. It was a statistical significant difference. So I don't know if this just applies to sex, but it could apply to everything. That the woman may think one thing to be true, but physiologically something else is very true for her. She may think she wants a nice guy, but physiologically the nice guy doesn't turn her on. Bad boy does. So again, I don't know if this is just about sex. I can't extrapolate the results of this and apply it to everything else that women do. But it is a good starting point to just point out that there's good reason when I tell men, pay attention to what women do, not what they say. Pay attention, because if you pay attention to what they say, they'll make you crazy. So just pay attention to what they do. It's a better barometer if you want to know what reality is.
Can you give me an example of that?
Okay. One of the things, well, yeah, I want a nice guy, but going back to the jerks, probably the example most of us know. As a marriage therapist, I started working with couples 40 years ago. So I've worked with a lot of couples. I've been married 3 times. So, I've been down the road of relationship. Probably the most common things I see couples fight about. And I'm primarily talking about heterosexual couples, but it's interesting. You'll see the same thing with gay couples and lesbian couples. And I'll make just kind of a side note here, is that it seems like in both the gay world and the lesbian world, they really understand polarity. They understand masculine, feminine polarity. That you have to have a pitcher, you have to have a catcher. You have to have a top, you have to have a bottom. You have to have a dominant, you have to have a sub, right? They tend to get that. Straight couples, we've been kind of, we're all the same, we're all equal, it's all the same. And so straight people tend to have pretty boring sex life. I'm making a generalization because we've been told, dominance and submission are bad. Pitcher, catcher, no, why can't any person do what they want? We should be able to. Well, you're right, you can. And there should be a reciprocity. It tends to work better. But to really have polarity, to have an intensity, there does have to be, a doer and a done too. Okay? So it just works out that way. So what happens is this polarity is actually usually there even in the heterosexual relationships. And what happens, the fights that I often see, and I'm going to make a gender generalization, so take it as a generalization. Most of the fights I've seen between couples, the woman, or let's say the more feminine identified person in the relationship, will make an emotional statement. The more masculine identified person in the relationship will hear it as a factual statement and want to argue the facts of it. And so what happens is the woman says, you just don't love me anymore. And because she's not feeling loved in that moment. It's an emotional statement. And the masculine, male usually, partner goes, well, that's just not true. Look at all this what I do for you, and look at I do this for you, and I tell you I love you all the time, and I do this for, and the woman now is still not feeling any more loved because the guy's arguing the facts with her. And the guy's beginning to feel like, I don't even know what she's talking about. She's batshit crazy. She's saying the wall's blue, and I'm sure it's white, right? And so so that's where a really big pattern will show up, is the emotional statement of the feminine that the masculine male mind just cannot fathom, can't understand. And I like to give this example of it. I was doing a workshop a few years ago, and my wife was traveling out of town to Guadalajara, Mexico. And right before I started the workshop, I got a text from her that said, you haven't said you love me all day. And I'm thinking, about 5 minutes, I'm going to start this workshop. And she's saying, you haven't said, and so I knew she was upset. And the dude in me, the guy in me, would have just naturally argued that fact because I knew it was untrue. But I heard the emotional statement. And I just wrote her back, so I'm about to get started. I love you so much. I'm so grateful that you're my wife. Have an amazing time, in Guadalajara with your family. And then, later that night, I got back to my house. I was holding this in a hotel, but I was staying at my house. It was nearby. So I'm in bed that night, and I go, I know I said I loved her. So I got on WhatsApp, and I scrolled. 5 times that day, I texted her on WhatsApp that I love her. So I took screenshots of all because I'm a dude. And I wasn't gonna club her over the head with it, but I just thought I had to test my own reality, right? I knew you knew the wall was white. Yeah. How do you test the reality? So yeah. So and by the way, they do this stuff a lot of times just to stir up some drama, just because they want to feel a connection to you. They want to be engaged. They don't care if the tension feels bad to you, as long as they have the tension that they feel like they're connected to you. So I just sent my wife a lot of loving messages. And she got home Sunday night, she rode the bus to Guadalajara, rode it back, about a 5-hour bus ride back then. And so we're getting to bed that night, and she lies next to me, and she goes, I owe you an apology. I go, oh, really? She said, yeah, Friday night I said you hadn't said you loved me all day. I go, yeah, I remember. And she goes, on the bus ride home, I'm just looking through my phone. I was looking at WhatsApp, and she goes, actually, you said you loved me 4 times on Friday. I said, actually, it was 5. I got the screenshots. And we both just laughed about it because, she was just making an emotional statement. I don't feel loved right now. I feel distant from you. I don't know where you're at, what you're doing, who you're with, and but it came out like, you haven't said you love me all day. So often one of the biggest problems we see between men and women is not recognizing, is this an emotional statement or a factual statement? And men will then go, well, how do I know it's an emotional statement? And I go, the reason you know it's an emotional statement is twofold. 1, it seems batshit crazy to you. And 2, you want to argue it. That's how you know it's an emotional statement, not a factual statement. So if you can catch a breath, and now, having been, trying to figure out relationships for a long time, one thing that seems to be a good standard for me now is if my wife makes what appears to be an emotional statement or just an emotional act that I don't understand, right, is that I'll break it down. Instead of my projection of I'm going to argue the facts, I'm going to vindicate myself, I'm going to try to get you back to good, whatever, is I think, okay, either my wife's not feeling sufficiently loved by me right now, not feeling sufficiently connected to me right now, or not feeling sufficiently secure with me right now. And is there anything I can do about any of those 3 things? I don't have to fix anything. But can I give her more love? Can I create a deeper connection? Sometimes that even just means saying, come here, touching her, saying, look in my eyes, maybe nibbling on her neck a little bit, saying, how much I love you. Just anything that all of a sudden she comes back into a sense of connection and security and love. Don't have to argue any of the facts she's saying. In fact, it's better to tune most of those things out. She's saying, you did this, you did that, you did. Come here. No, come here. I don't want to come here. Come here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm creating some dominance. I'm leading. And then if she kind of comes here, look me in the eyes. I don't want to look me in the eyes. And if I can get her in the now, connected, present, grounded, breathing with her, looking in my eyes, calm is contagious. And it seems to calm her down. And then she feels now the connection, the flow of love. She's in the moment, not in her head, not projecting. And I found so often that's what really women say they want from the guy, is to be that rock, to be that grounded thing, that solid thing. My second wife used to say to me, I'm your Bermuda Triangle, you're my Rock of Gibraltar. She knew. She made me crazy. And she was grateful that I didn't, well, often I would, but at times don't follow her down her emotional rabbit hole, down into her craziness. I tell guys, women don't really want you on their roller coaster or in their emotional rabbit hole with them. They really want you with your feet on the ground saying, I'm still here. I'm still here. So I think if you kind of go with, for men listening, say, okay, if a woman does or says something that you just don't understand, don't go looking for the rational logic in it. Go looking for the emotional logic.
Yeah, what's she trying to communicate here that she's feeling?
And it usually is a feeling.
Yeah. And a lot of that, it makes me think as well about insecure attachment styles as well, because the tendency might be, this is me, what have I done, rather than like stepping out, zooming out, oh, actually, what's going on here, like objectively. I was thinking if there's any women listening.
So should we assume there's at least 1 or 2 women listening, or
one or two
dudes?
Hello, ladies. It's a mix.
It's all guys. Okay.
There's
women listening.
Yeah, it's 50-50. Hello, ladies. And let's say they're listening and they go, nah, I don't want to. I like a nice guy. I like a feminine guy.
I want to be in charge. I want to drive.
I want to be.
I want to tell them what to do. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you say? What are your thoughts? What do you say?
Knock yourself out. Knock yourself out. I see it all the time. And I see it especially with the younger generation, millennials, Generation Z. You've all grown up being told you're all equal. There is no gender. I mean, I was taught that in grad school in the 80s. There's no gender. Gender is just a social construct imprinted on little children so that boys are aggressive and competitive and girls are cooperative. And there's absolutely no evidence, no studies that actually support that. It's hogwash. But it's been taught in graduate schools to teachers, it's taught in the school system. I have a friend that teaches sexuality to elementary school kids, and they teach them there's as many genders as there are people in the world. Well, it's hogwash. I mean, it's not true, but it's taught as truth. And I'm not a big fan of squeezing people into gender roles. You're a guy, therefore you should. You're a woman, therefore you should. You're a guy, you should dominate. You're a woman, you should submit. I mean, I'm not a fan of that. But I'm also not a fan of saying, I'm non-binary. I have no gender. No, that doesn't work. So what I see in these relationships, again, when I was in graduate school, while I was being taught there was no gender, I was also being taught that everything masculine, this is before the word toxic masculine, everything masculine does is bad because it's competitive, but everything girls do is good because it's cooperative. And again, no value judgment was being put on male-female behavior, but it was, right? Mm-hmm. And this was all coming from female feminist teachers. And I pretty much bought into most of it at the time. But what's happening now, we've got a bunch of passive cooperative men walking around and a bunch of competitive kick-ass girls walking around. We got women get more advanced degrees than men. They're rising up in the workplace more than men. And there's a book that just came out, and I interviewed the author of it on my men's program yesterday. It's Dr. Orion Terabin. He's got a podcast called Psychax. And his book is called The Values of Others. And he talks about the sexual marketplace of how people attract and in this whole sexual marketplace. And he talks about something I'd never heard of before called the two-body problem. And it's kind of like, having two chefs, two pilots on the airplane, two people with the remote control in their hand. But basically the two-body problem refers to two people that both have invested, in their education, their career. They both have, really invested a lot of time and energy. And unfortunately, they create a redundancy that neither one really necessarily needs the other one. And they're both so invested in career that there's no real room left over for relationship. And he said what happens basically is that, and this is what I've seen, is the women that have been out there, following this pattern, you need a career, you need your education, don't ever be dependent on a man. They get out there and they do this, and the workplace, especially like technology companies, really encourage it. Someone told me the other day that Meta pays women to have their eggs frozen, because they're working right through their most fertile periods of life. And these tech companies want to keep the women working for them. They have an investment in them. And so, you can have a baby later. Freeze your eggs, right?
Freeze them till you're 70.
Yeah, till you're 70. So what happens is these women hit about now 38. 40 seems to be the magic number of their clock ticking. And they go, I'm ready to settle down, find a man, and have a baby or two. I need the fashion accessory of a child, But the biological clock is ticking. Now they decide to start looking for the man. But unfortunately, like most women, they want a man probably who's outperforming them, monetarily, career-wise, and they look around and they go, where are those guys? They're not here.
Obviously, it's a bit of a trope, but like money won't make you happy and all this, but the only people that are saying money won't make you happy are the people that have made fuckloads of it and then go, oh yeah, like it doesn't make you happy, or because they have the luxury to be able to say, yeah, I've done it. But for the rest of us, I can tell you now, I'm like, I can see how it's true, but I'm like, yeah, I'll find out myself. Thank you very much. Like, I will keep fucking charging towards that.
Dude, I hear you so much. And part of me thinks, like we're all on our own path. We're all on our own journey. I think some people, in terms of the body image stuff, need to achieve what it is they set out to achieve just to experience how miserable trying to maintain that actually is. And there are other people like more, and there are other people who just realize that they're in so much pain, struggling so much, and still not where they want to be. So what the hell, you know? And sometimes that was more my path. Like, I was never on the cover of Men's Health, you know? I periodically was in, you know, magazine level good shape, but I could never maintain it. And I'm still in, quote, good shape now, like whatever that means, but a more sustainable version of that where I'm not aiming for the lowest possible body fat percentage at all times. And so, yeah, I think to some degree, we all do have to explore the territory ourselves and figure out what we feel first. Sometimes I say to people who call me, like, I'm usually the last person people call. I'm the person that people call when everything else has not worked. And I'm fine with that. It's okay. But as the eating disorder informed nutrition and stress management coach, people often call me last when all different other approaches have failed them. And I'm just like, that's okay. You needed to explore that in order to have conviction in what we're doing here now.
What does your coaching practice look like in terms of on like a practical level? Like, are you still doing some elements of PT? I imagine having that base was quite nice to be able to branch into the more niche stuff you're doing now. But tell me about how that's.
I spend a lot more time focusing on stress management and emotional management than I do getting into really granular sports science about training and nutrition. It's like the most basic nutrition and training principles work. They fucking work. We don't need to get so granular about nutrition and exactly the right weight training program. A basic approach will work. Why people, in my opinion at least, that the people who come to me, and it was true in my journey as well, why people start to think that, oh, this doesn't work, this basic stuff doesn't work, I need to make it more complicated, is because the area of stress management, emotional management, mindset, fulfillment, all that is being sacrificed or neglected on a level where it is compromising our effectiveness in the application of the very effective basics when it comes to nutrition and training. So if we take a little bit of the energy that we're investing in going down the rabbit hole with training and nutrition and instead go, all right, let's look at stress management, emotional management, communication, fulfillment, all those areas, then our outcomes in terms of training and nutrition improve. So that's the thing that I work with people a lot with, like in terms of we do a lot of work with emotional management, stress management, sometimes communication and relationships, but we look at life around food and the gym.
Okay. Thank you. And what about like what are the steps if you can outline them for someone to break free from binge eating?
The fundamental pillars of binge eating are emotional dysregulation, diet rigidity, and the overvaluation of weight and shape, in no particular order of appearance. Usually, if someone is struggling with binge eating, they're struggling with two or more of those things. So struggles with emotional regulation, often diets that are way too rigid or too restrictive, and overvaluing physical appearance. Now, this doesn't mean that we need to not care about how we look, because we're human and part of us is always going to be invested in our appearance. But the overvaluation, putting too much stock in how we look, causes a problem. So the first steps would be identifying where the problem is. Like, which of these three areas causes the is most prominent or causes the biggest problem for you. And I've got screening exercises and a few things to help identify like where the key kind of problems are, because I get people coming to me saying things like, I know my diet is too strict, and I know that I'm fixating on my physical appearance, but emotional regulation isn't really a problem for me. I don't struggle with that at all. I'm fine. And then they'll do this screening tests, and something like emotional dysregulation will come up as the most prominent one. So the first thing we need to do before anything else is identify where the problem is, and then also get really well acquainted with what is not serving you, what's not working. Because before we start introducing solutions, we want to like just put aside the things that we can be absolutely clear that right now in this point in time, they haven't worked before. They're not going to work if we keep doing it. So let's put them aside. It's like the first step of climbing out of a hole is to put down the shovel. You know? Stop digging. You know?
Sorry, I'm a bit slow on the uptake. Yeah. Yeah, stop digging. Yeah, of course. All right. Thank you. Do you have any advice for a fellow podcaster?
I guess that's an interesting one. I don't actually do, like, I get a couple of people asking me about podcast stuff, and the main piece of advice that I would give is podcasting is just reps. Like, treat every episode just like another rep towards being able to record with less preparation. So if we look at maybe if the goal, I don't know about you, but my goal with podcasting is to get so good at it that I can write a few dot points in about 5 or 10 minutes and then just speak into a mic about those dot points and then do a quick edit and put out the episode. When I first started, I would spend 4 to 5 hours writing out the script and the plan for the episode. I would spend another couple of hours trying to record it and making sure that I was sounding good and everything like that. And then I was really slow at editing, so I'd spend another couple of hours. It would take an entire day to do one episode. And people would say to me, I just write out dot points and speak, just speak, just let go, just speak. And I was like, fuck, like that comes with time. I wish someone had told me, like, just get the reps in. The more you do this, the faster you get at it. And there is no secret hack or secret formula. Just get the reps in. Don't worry about overcomplicating it, and it will get better. If you repeat it, if you do the reps, it's impossible for it to not get better. So that's, I don't know, you seem like a pretty good podcaster already, so I don't know what advice I would have to give really, but that was just a big stumbling point for me.
Yeah, I mean, this is, what are we on now? Like, this is maybe episode 30, I think.
Nice.
And I've been doing it over a year, but publishing weekly since about April. One a week. And it has been like difficult recently. I think because like I've gone into like a heavy training phase with the competition in October. So it's like we talk about periodization a lot. And like I had like my podcast period at the beginning of the year, and my training was kind of like, you know, I'd half an eye on it. And then, but yeah, and then the year before, like I had my training period with no podcasting, and now they've both kind of started coming together, where I'm in like in this period of going, right, well, the podcast like is kind of like doing quite well at the moment. I need to like keep on with that. Like maybe I need to start doing more content. Maybe I need to like push my Instagram more. But I'm like, well, like, what's the goal right now? Well, my goal is kind of like the high rocks thing, like my competition. And I think I need to like remember, like, it's like, in terms of like my main goals, like what do I need to maintain and what do I need to push on with?
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, like at the moment, the podcast, it's like a maintenance phase. It's just like, just keep them coming.
Yeah.
Just keep them coming. Like, don't stress about it. If you're going to stress about anything, stress about the training.
Yeah.
But obviously don't stress. No, I appreciate that. Like, it is totally just a reps thing, isn't it? And my preparation and stuff constantly changes, and like, I mean, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and obviously we're bringing this to an end now. But one of the things, like, so like I've got like a fucking list of all these questions, which I like always prepare. I didn't ask most of them, but I always think like the best conversations I have is when I can just like stay present with the guest and kind of like, oh, what's that? Let's go down that route. What's that? Let's go down that route. Let's like. And that's a skill that I'm really trying to learn, of just being, and it's like you said before, it's like letting go.
Yeah.
Letting go of like control and just like taking it, because that's like another like theme with my podcast is like authenticity, like fucking scary, like extreme authenticity. And just like, and this is what I try to have throughout all my conversations. I've always thought of myself as an extrovert, but like I want to get someone and like talk to them in the corner about fucking psychedelics or something, and that's kind of where I get really burnt out with all the surface level stuff.
Feel exactly the same.
Yeah, and I think there are more extroverts than we realize, introverts than we realize, and especially in
masking.
Masking, and this comes back to alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so actually, I put a pin in alcohol. So let's go back to, it's like when I was a kid, I was a very shy little boy. Mm-hmm. My sister was very loud, extroverted. Look at me, Jason, hold the camera straight. While she was like, literally there is footage of me behind a camera, and she performing and stuff like that. Yeah. That's cool. And then like my experience was like, like popular lads and like lads that used to fuck about would get with the girls. Like, we're talking like primary school. Mm-hmm. And when you kind of like look from afar, kind of like, how is it these guys get to talk to them girls and stuff? I remember very intentionally, like I had a summer before I went to secondary school into year 7, mm-hmm. and I was like, right, I'm going to change. Mm-hmm. And I started that first September back. I started fucking around. I started being cheeky. I started making jokes. I started talking to girls and stuff. And I've always thought of that as like, oh, I just come out my shell. Mm-hmm. And then the more that I'm like looking into this introversion, extroversion thing, I'm like, was it that I saw the love and attention, adoration that people got who are extroverted, and because no one values the shy kid in the corner. No one gives.
What you're saying is you constructed a persona. You constructed a persona in order to receive the kind of like social and intimate appreciation that you saw other people getting and you wanted.
I think so.
Uh-huh.
I think so. Yeah, and yeah, and it's just like, but like when you start to look at masks, like it's kind of like, what the fuck? Like, really? Mm-hmm. Have I been wearing a mask? Like, who is Jason? And like, and then okay, so now let's bring in alcohol. What does alcohol do? Alcohol turns introverts into extroverts in a society in which introversion is not valued.
Mm. So there's a few points here. Thank Thank you so much for sharing that. That's fucking beautiful. I think we may just both have a touch of the tism. I think I'm looking to it, and I'm kind of like, wow,
Touch of the
really fucking
tism.
stepped it up here. Fuck.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
But yeah, I feel that, and I also feel that quite strongly, is that for a lot of my life, I felt like I've been playing a role. I feel like I've kind of had this characterization, and it's when you always wear a mask, you forget what your face looks like. And then it's the process of looking at you, really looking at yourself, really fucking looking at yourself, and realizing what developed as a response to something, what developed as a need, what developed as, like, what was part of this persona you constructed. And you also brought up that, like, introverts aren't appreciated in our society. And I think it's very easy to feel that way, especially when you're seeing extroverts get all the conversation, get all the opportunities, all that kind of shit happen. But at the same time, there are just as many introverts who want those fucking corner conversations about your fucking special interest at the moment. We can also be a little harder to find because we're also masking as extroverts, being like, oh yeah, sweet, how was your day? Blah, 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 blah. Have some small talks, and like trying to fit in with the louder, more dominant culture, rather than being like, hey man, so mycelium, want to go on this one? There's a table over there with none of these loud dickheads, and we can just really get into like the mechanics of arm bars.
Although I do think that was like like you can sort of like just like we sort of attract each other, where you kind of like look at that guy over there with like look at that girl over there with no fucking forehead expression. I seem to always end up with the neurodivergence, but yeah. And by the way, introverts are valued in society, as in, great thinkers, authors, fill in the blank. But I think as like a meta kind of, or like a, certainly like at school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, school's
at
a
school,
big one.
Yeah, like you're going to get more attention if you're louder, or and actually I noticed this in myself recently, where I went to like a seminar at the gym, and I ask a lot of questions. And I don't believe that's masking. Like, that's my genuine curiosity. Maybe it's like I don't know. Maybe there's something wrapped in there, like this teacher's pet kind of need for connection going on. There's probably some of that going on. But then I noticed, and someone I said afterwards had mentioned, this person is autistic, and they said, I found it hard to focus all the time because you were the one asking the questions. And I was like, fuck. And like, and there's a great example of it. Like, the person who shouts the loudest, the person who asks the more, like, they get a more tailored experience.
Yeah.
Because they're able to shove everyone else out the way. Me, like, do you know what I mean? Like, and then it kind of like, yeah, it kind of gave a different flavor to that idea of, you're asking the stupid questions that other people are thinking.
Yeah.
But then he was like, oh, fucking hell, yeah, but I hope I'm not like ruining other people's experience because I'm like asking all these questions.
Well, yeah, but I suppose, I think anytime you think of a question, there's at least like 5 other people in the class who have thought the same question but didn't have the balls to ask it.
Yeah. I'll stick with that one.
Yeah. Mate. And I think, go on, mate. What were you going to say? I was going to take us to like school and kids and like behaviors in that.
Yeah, let's go.
like the traditional school system that we're under right now was developed during the Industrial Revolution, to make people good workers. There's a quote by fucking Rockefeller, which was like, "I don't need thinkers, I need workers." Paraphrasing, of course, but something equally fucking heinous. And I think especially for motherfucker, like, you can't put fucking kids in a room for like 8 fucking hours and expect them not to go batshit insane and start beating the shit out of each other and screaming and stuff. It's not how we're supposed to fucking do. Like, and again, like, I think about, I made the Stansted analogy about all of these factors. I remember the fluorescent lighting. I remember the constant shouting, the constant noise, things like that. And then you're expected to learn under these conditions with so much shit going on. And again, we talk about the loudest kids, and kind of either being in trouble or needing to get that attention. And, if you're not getting attention for being good, then you will get attention for being bad. When we are in that like melting pot of social interaction, like, I would say every day at high school was like a wedding. Because you got form in the morning, you got groups there, you got the fucking playground outside, like, who are you with, what's going on, and then you're in English class and you've got to learn, and then there's this one dickhead next to you who never shuts up or like is always like prodding you or something like that. So you're in this rock polisher where you're really forced to develop a persona. You're very forced to develop who the fuck you are and how you want to act. So many of those things are responses to everyone else who is also in this incredibly high intensity situation. I think that also gives us some quite maladaptive responses, which we then carry around for years and years until they bump off something. And that's something that comes up for me quite often is, here's an analogy for this one. So a few years ago, one of my partners was like, "Hey, Chris, do you want some peanut M&Ms?" And I was like, "No, I fucking hate peanut M&Ms." And she was like, "When was the last time you had one?" And I was like, I was 5 or some shit. I was a kid and someone gave me a peanut M&M and I hated it. And she was like, "Why don't you try one now?" And I was like, "I don't like them, but fine, I'll fucking try it." And I tried a peanut M&M and I was like, "Brilliant, love it, fantastic." Because I'd taken on this idea of myself as someone who hates peanut M&Ms, that's 20 years or something, I've not eaten one. And so again, like, we take on these bits, and until, again, we bring it back to drinking, we're like, "Oh yeah, no, sweet, I just drank." And until that drinking starts bumping on other parts of your life, you don't look at it, you don't examine it, you don't get it. And we operate under these parameters. We have these sunglasses on which show us how we want to move through the world.
Hey guys, it's me. Thank you so much for watching that episode, and congratulations for making it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. A few things before you get going. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. And if you enjoyed this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to share it with a friend or family member. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to both my guests and myself. And if you made it this far, why don't you drop me a DM?